Is he from Cuba or Puerto Rico?
Maybe off topic.
Colombia.
It is your last cosmic dance as part of your training. And I'm not totally sure what I'm going to talk about. There are several options, and the main thing I want to lead up to is the full non-dualism, because often in my talks I give a watered down version, because I'm often frightened of going too deep and then it frightening you. But it's much better, I think, at the end of the day to have the complete teaching rather than a modified version of it. So as a lead-in, last week we just mentioned the 5 veils from the Advaita tradition in response to your question, Ilya. And as a lead-in, I'm just going to go into it a bit. And as we said last week, there's aham and idam, which is I and that. And it's all about what you see as external to you and what you see as I. And in the 5 veils, which is from the Advaita tradition, so it's the original Sri Shankara, back in round about the 8th or the 9th century, and it's sort of like layers of sedge on a pond. So you've got this lovely crystal clear water, and you've got these layers of scum, as it were, on top of it. And the original Sri Shankara gave a sort of process of disidentifying with different levels. So the first one, as we mentioned, was Annamaya, which is the veil of food, and that's just physical body, flesh and bones. And so that one's really easy, and for a lot of people that's the seat of identity. But then with the I and that, you notice that already your physical body is a that, because already you sort of refer to my foot or my leg, and you sort of look at it, and so it's not ultimately I. And then, so you move back one layer in the disidentification process, and then you come to what's known as pranamaya. And in the Indian tradition, that refers to the different vital forces. And in China, they call it chi. India, they call it prana. And Dr. Rolls referred to it as the neurochemical mechanisms. So from a Western point of view, it's like there are certain functions that go on within your body which aren't directly physical but are still measurable to some degree by science. And a lot of that, I think, includes things like the hormonal cycles. And anyone who's had glandular fever or who suffers from premenstrual tension or been through the menopause will know what a massive effect the hormones and that level can have on your identity and the way you view the world. So one minute you can be blissfully happy, and then the next minute something completely takes over you, and the world looks very different. So that's all part of pranamaya. And it also links into what Eckhart Tolle referred to as the pain body. When you're very hormonal, it will link into your experiences of pain and hurt from the past, and you start to view life from the point of view of a particular wound. So that's all part of prana. But then again, a part of you is aware of that, so part of you is watching and witnessing the different changing emotions and your changes in energy. And so then you go backwards one more into what's called Manamaya. And Manamaya relates to what's known as manas, which is the Sanskrit word for the moving mind. And this particular veil is what gives rise to the differentiation between yourself and the outside world. So when your thinking mind disappears for a bit, there's no longer this self of sense and other. So it's a very important veil, that one. And there's one non-dual teacher who had he divided the mind into two parts: thinking mind and working mind. And working mind is like the part of your mind that automatically deals with things. So you need your working mind to operate all the things you have to do in daily life and reacting with other people. Whereas thinking mind was more related to the monkey mind, which often runs out of control and races into an imagined future or a past which is over and done with. But always, even when you're thinking and feeling, there's something behind it which is aware of the thinking and feeling. So you go one step back, and that's called Vijnanamaya, and that relates to discrimination, and in the Advaita tradition, the part of the mind which is known as buddhi. And the word buddh is a Sanskrit word which means to wake up as if from a swoon. So buddhi is your organ of discrimination, and it's not discrimination in terms of shall I have that cake or shall I have some chocolate. It's discrimination which allows you to get behind the world of appearances and see the ultimate cause of things. And the word Buddha means one who has awakened. So a Buddha is someone who's awakened to the nature of reality and what lies behind the world of appearances. And Vijnanamaya, interestingly enough, in terms of a veil, it's the part of you which has to be let go of at some point, which perceives yourself as a separate doer. So the whole sense of identity and doership belongs to this veil. And we discussed that a bit last week, the sense of not being the doer, and starting to see that you as a separate identity don't actually exist in the real world, and everything is part of a much larger play which is going on. So that's Vijnanamaya, and part of the use of the discriminative mind or buddhi is to understand this and get behind the world of appearances, and like the ants and the pen writing on the paper, to take your thinking and your experience back and back in this chain of causality. Now, for all of us, this Vijnanamaya is an incredibly difficult one to give up, because hardly anyone wants to let go of the sense of personal doership or attributing your actions to a separate self. But when you do give it up and you truly let go, and that relates to turning, then automatically you find that you're experiencing what's known as Anandamaya, and Ananda roughly translates as bliss. But it's not really like sudden ecstatic bliss, it's more this really sort of deep feeling of rightness and contentment. So let go of the sense of separate doership, and then automatically the Anandamaya, the great happiness it's sometimes called, starts to arise of itself. And then, as we discussed last week, Anandamaya is still described as a veil because it's still an experience which has both a beginning and an end in time and space. whereas what you really are is the great stillness which witnesses it. Bliss comes and goes. However much bliss you have, it will, at a certain point, it will evaporate. So that's not ultimately, again, who you are. Who you are is the great stillness or sense of beingness, but witnesses, without comment, all these changes that go on within the movie. So having disidentified from layer after layer, then you find that you are the great stillness which is everything. And then you start to see that all of these things exist within you. And there's a great Indian story from the Advaita tradition about a particular king who announced that one day he'd give away the keys to his kingdom. And he announced that anyone who would come and meet him at a particular time on a particular day would inherit his kingdom. And so lots of people set out, and on the way to meeting the king, he had all these different things were set up, like stalls with amazing artifacts and amazing fabrics and jewellery and stuff. And nearly everyone got stuck at one of those stalls on the way to the king, and only one person made it all the way through and met the king at the appointed time and inherited the whole kingdom. And inheriting the kingdom included all the different stalls and all the different attractions. So that's like a metaphor for, in your experience and your thinking, not stopping at lesser levels of identity. So going all the way right through to the great stillness and the great oneness, which is your true nature. Our non-dual teacher, the Shankaracharya, put it, he said, all duality must be eliminated. So it's like in your thinking and experience, you gradually eliminate all trace of dualism till you see everything as it is, which is all the manifestation of the great oneness. So that sort of takes me on to non-dualism. And in most mystical and religious traditions, one of the great pitfalls is getting stuck at the level of good and evil. Because I remember in Collett House back in the 1970s and 80s, people found it very difficult to get out of the sense that we're on the side of the good and they're on the side of the bad. And almost everyone perceives themselves like that. Of course I'm on the side of the good and you're on the side of the bad. But everyone perceives themselves in normal life of being the good one. So, and on non-dualism, here's a very succinct piece from American philosopher Ken Wilber. And he says that there is a way out of that suffering, a way to be free of the opposites. And that involves the overwhelming and direct realization that spirit is not good versus evil, or pleasure versus pain, or light versus dark, or life versus death, or whole versus part, or holistic versus analytic. Spirit is the great player that gives rise to all those opposites equally. And he quotes from the Old Testament, I, the Lord, make the light to fall on the good and the bad alike. I, the Lord, do all these things. And the mystics the world over agree, spirit is not the good half of the opposites, but the ground of all the opposites. And our salvation, as it were, is not to find the good half of the dualism, but to find the source of both halves of the dualism, for that is what we are in truth. We are both sides in the great game of life, because we, you and I, in the deepest recesses of our very self, have created both of these opposites in order to have a grand game of cosmic checkers. And then Rumi says exactly the same thing. And because Rumi is sort of explaining why in the movie of life you have really nice people and then you also have villains. So this is Rumi's explanation as to why there are villains. And he says in the Mathnavi, and if you say that evils too are from him, that is true, but how is it a defect in his grace? His bestowing this evil is even his perfection. I will tell you a parable in illustration, O respected one. A painter made two kinds of pictures, beautiful pictures and pictures devoid of beauty. He painted Joseph and fair-formed houris. He painted ugly Afrits and devils. Both kinds of pictures are evidence of his mastery. Those ugly ones are not evidence of his ugliness. They are evidence of his bounty. He makes the ugly of extreme ugliness. It is invested with all possible ugliness, in order that the perfection of his skill may be displayed, and that the denier of his mastery may be put to shame. And if he cannot make the ugly, he is deficient in skill. Hence he, God, is the creator of both the infidel and the sincere faithful. From this point of view, then, both infidelity and faith are bearing witness to him. Both are bowing down in worship before his lordliness. And then he says, a bit further on, the real beloved is that one who is single, who is by beginning and end. When thou findest him, thou wilt not remain in expectation of aught else. He is both the manifest and also the mystery. He is the Lord of states of feeling, not dependent on any state. Month and year are slaves of that moon. When he bids the state, it does his behest. When he wills, he makes bodies become spirit. One that is stopped on the way is not at the journey's end, and he will be seated, waiting and seeking the state. Yeah, that's quite a bit to swallow. My sort of passion in life has been trying to find, it was sort of inspired by Dr. Rawls, and trying to find a way beyond the opposites of the apparent goods and evil and good and bad. Any comments? What I sort of observe just in a sort of practical way in life with villains is in history you get great big villains, but millions of people on the other side of the fence think the person is absolutely wonderful, but then millions of people on the other side of the fence think the same person's an absolute villain, and vice versa. So it ends up being appearing to be a very relative perspective.
So essentially non-duality is telling us not to take life so seriously.
Absolutely. It's telling you it's a great movie and you're the one mind acting in the movie, and as part of your movie you're going to meet all these horrifically frightening people who you're going to be terrified of, and you're going to meet lovely people who you're going to fall in love with, and the movie goes on like that. But part of the art of dancing in the movie is to remember who is it that is dancing. So who are you? Are you this little separate self really in the movie, or are you the one mind dancing and experiencing all these different things?
Then why do the Indians try so hard to get rid of the dance?
Why?
Why are the Indians, the Hindu
Oh,
tradition?
why do they try to get rid of it?
Well, yeah, because they're all about, all these layers, right? And going towards.
Yeah, it's the dance gets more fun once you realise that it is a dance. So mystical traditions, including the Hindu one, is they have these different metaphors of ways of going back in the chain of causality till you come to the great stillness, which is your true nature and which witnesses and creates the movie. And when you have access to that, then dancing the dance of life becomes much more enjoyable, because you're not quite so caught up in it. And also you're no longer backing off from it in fear. You go into it more fully. So it's like it gives you the ability to recognise what the dance really is. And that's the symbolism of this, of course. The dance of Shiva is the dance of manifestation. And all of us are consciousness dancing. And the Macabre is a brilliant illustration of that dance. Does that answer it at all?
Yeah. Because there has to be something good about it, because they put so much effort in it. And it's not that pleasant. Like a lot of the things they do, like.
Yeah. When you go to the cinema, well, I was talking to myself, I enjoy films much more if they've got a really good villain in them. So then you can see how in the Life movie, from the point of view of consciousness, you need all the different shades of experience. So a good movie has pretty good villains.
So you like the contrast when it's higher?
Yeah, you get a contrast.
It's fine. It's like the illumination. As close people go to the illumination, they go to the shadow. So you have always facing the shadow, I think.
Yeah. Also, as Rumi says, the evil we see in other people is our own character reflected. So in the great movie, all the other people are just reflecting back our own characteristics. He illustrates out of a story of there was this really fierce lion who was eating all the rabbits and things, and all the rabbits had a sort of deal that each week they'd give the lion another rabbit to eat, so it drew lots. And one day this really wise rabbit, it was his turn, so he dutifully went along to this great big fierce lion. It wasn't that lion, by the way. He's a friendly lion. And when he took a long time getting to the lion, and when he got there, the lion was quite angry and said, "Why are you so late?" And the rabbit said, "Well, it was on the way here, I met another lion, and he wanted to eat me, and I said, no, you can't eat me. I've got to go and be eaten by this other lion." And so the lion got so enraged, he said, "Well, take me to this lion so I can gobble him up." And so the wise rabbit took the lion back to this well, and he said, "The big lion lives down that well." And then the lion looked over and saw this fierce lion looking up at him from the bottom of the well, and he was so enraged he dived into the well down to attack his own reflection and perished. So that's a good illustration. So watch what annoys you in the great movie. But ultimately the whole of this philosophy of what I call the cosmic dance is reminding you this is all a play and a drama and a movie. And ultimately, however terrible life is, at the depths of your being, you're perfectly okay, and nothing touches that. But, as I was saying, with philosophies and non-dualism, an awful lot of people get stuck at the level of good and evil. And this is actually about going beyond the pairs of opposites. And that sort of leads on into Lilac-'s question of evolution.
Evolution.
Evolution. And Lilac-'s question, by evolution you meant, you're not talking about Darwinism, you're talking about, is society and mankind going on an evolving path? Including Darwin. We sort of know Darwinism has sort of happened up to a certain point, don't we? Because I dig up dinosaurs and we see a sort of certain evolution and development. Even in the sort of dinosaurs I've dug up from 153 million years ago are basically the same sort of model as we are, with sort of backbone and ribs and everything. But you can see it's been sort of slightly modified. So the main bit you're talking about is, as a species, are we developing?
So my question I've discovered, and I'm so glad that it came with the non-duality talk, because it was really on my mind, and then I asked a friend of mine who's got lots of clarity. And my question is, and he said something to do with non-dualism that made me think, wow, and it's making me wake up every morning. So my question is, since we are evolving, apparently, and isn't this thing, this I, the I, since I is everything, but it's got everything inside it, and since we're evolving, apparently, isn't it also evolving? I know, and then I feel like, ooh, no, you shouldn't talk about that, because I still have some things about not speaking about the big, God that comes from my religious upbringing, that is being, but. And then when I asked my friend, he said, well, from a non-duality perspective, they're both the same. They're not separate. But that means this is incredible, because this means right now, everything that's coming up is absolutely incredibly legitimate. Like, we don't suppress anything. Everything is coming up for that. And especially since we don't have any choice, right? Since it's all coming up. From one point, we don't have any choice. But yeah, that's my question. So, is everything evolving? Is even stillness evolving? That's sort of my question, and it's so funny.
I don't know the answer at all.
And I really want to find out for myself. I feel like
I don't think stillness is evolving. This is just going on my experience. Because what looks out through my eyes hasn't changed at all. It's exactly like it was when I was 5 years old. Or I can remember my christening and the vicar holding me and everyone standing around in a circle. And what was looking out hasn't changed one tiny bit. What has changed is the vehicle through which it looks. body changes all the time, and my thoughts and feelings and my interests and my passions have sort of evolved. So just from my experience, the vehicle evolves, but the consciousness which looks out, in my experience, remains the same and is perfect. But what do I know?
This is really strange.
We are mutating like a rat.
Play goes on.
This is my little experience. No, I say that we are mutating all the time. How about
With the play, what I love is that the play isn't leading anywhere, so it's a play for the sake of the play. What would worry me slightly about evolution is we're trying to get somewhere. In the Indian tradition, they have what they call the yugas, which are ages. So you have the Kali Yuga, and I can't remember the names of the other ones. But even that is cyclic. So you sort of go around through different periods. They have dark ages and golden ages. And at Colet here, back in the 1970s, we all thought we were sort of heading towards this great holistic worldview, and there was going to be a new paradigm which we were going to usher in, and all scientists would cease to be reductionist and would become holistic, and everyone would love each other and there'd be no more wars. And that's a sort of utopian view, and it was all sort of geared around the sort of year 2000, and I sort of bought into that. But watching the way things have unfolded, it hasn't actually gone like that. And for myself, I sort of realised, to put it in so many words, that it's already just right. It's not. It doesn't have to get anywhere. The very nature of life as it is includes both beauty and terror. So there'll always be wars, I think. There'll always be villains in the drama. But behind it all, there's always this great stillness which is available. So with grand evolution, you can see, just how we've come from Stone Age and Neolithic man, and we went through the Enlightenment where everyone sort of started doing science, and then we've gone into a sort of communication age. Is that going to evolve into something else, or will it just sort of go around in a circle? I don't know the answer at all. I don't know. What I do know is what looks out for you through your eyes needs no modification and doesn't need to evolve. There's a brilliant thing, do you know anything about full non-dualism? And what really rivets me about it is, here's a story from the 6th Zen patriarch, who was called Hui Neng. And when the 5th patriarch was getting near to death, near to dying, he wasn't sure who the next patriarch was going to be. So he wanted his students to write a poem which sort of summed up their experience of how they saw the teaching. And one of the senior students, who was much sort of favoured as a possible disciple, and his name was Shen Sui, wrote, "Our body is the Bodhi tree, and our mind a mirror bright. Carefully we wipe them now by hour, and let no dust alight." So Shen Sui was pretty pleased with his contribution, because it was all about working hard and creating consciousness, a bit like the bottom-up view of reality. But then there was also a very illiterate monk who couldn't write, but he got someone, he dictated his poem, and the illiterate monk's name was Hui Neng, and he saw this first poem, "Our body is the Bodhi tree, and our mind a mirror bright. Carefully we wipe them now by hour, and let no dust alight." And Hui Neng changed it to, "There is no Bodhi tree, nor stand of mirror bright. Since all is void, where can the dust alight?" And the master, the fifth patriarch, saw instantly that Hui Neng's understanding of Zen was way ahead of Shen Sui, and he became the next patriarch. So it's like having that ability to go beyond, in your thinking and your experience, beyond the pairs of opposites, and be like the person who went and met the king and inherited the kingdom. So that for me is a great sort of challenge. I know it's all a movie, but still within the movie, even if it is fully formed and perfectly there already, you act as if it isn't. You act as if it's all chance and it's all up to you, and you do your very best. And Rumi says, "Trust in God, but tie the knee of your camel." So it's no good trusting in God and leaving your camel untied and it runs away. Even if you trust in God, you still have to play your part in the movie and tie your camel up.
So it's more like a computer game rather than a movie.
The Matrix.
There are two things happening in me. One part is amazed by the bit that your experience is that it's the same, nothing changes about it, and the thing that's looking through. And the other part is really feeling like things are moving, things are evolving somehow. And with I feel like it's just we have more possibility of waking up from the bottom up, from the relative side of the street, from the absolute. It's top down and you're choiceless, but from the bottom up, it feels like it's moving forward, and it feels like it's getting easier somehow for us.
That's nice. 100 years ago, this sort of teaching was very remote and hard to come by.
Yeah.
You'd have to sort of sort out Mr. Uspensky, sort of, where are we? Yeah, you'd have to have gone to St. Petersburg and tracked him down or become a theosophist, whereas now it's absolutely everywhere. 200 years ago.
Isn't what like a dervish community for the centuries back? How would they see themselves, and wouldn't be that their role in this? I mean, not like a taken role, but ultimately by their being, wouldn't be that what they would do in the societies in wherever they are?
What are you asking?
Would it be like how dervish community would actually see themselves in a dance? How they would see them in a dance? Would it be dance for dancing?
I think it would be dance. Yeah.
Wider.
I can't really speak for them because I wasn't there.
Well, from as far maybe as you.
Lipper's not that old.
I mean,
I'm not that old. Yeah.
The reason I'm asking, I kind of have this view on it as well, where in Russia in same years, and there was a very similar history with there was Komarovs, who would be like entertainers who would be going around the country and entertaining people and telling exactly very non-dual story.
Yeah.
Matryoshka around and telling people about the, the beauty of the creation, and somewhere in the same period of time it would be happening. Same what dervishes would be stopped from turning, and Skomaroks would be I don't know, just the community would be dismantled somehow.
Yeah.
But essentially that what were they doing.
Yeah. You've always had the idea of a dervish sort of, you have a wandering dervish, and then the dervish appears in the marketplace when they're needed. And Dr. Rolls, I remember him saying our role as a society is like the holy man in the marketplace. So you're in life fully, and you go off to where you're needed. So because it's a perfect movie, you turn up always exactly where you're meant to be. You can all go home if you want.
Last question.
Yeah.
What about like physical pain?
Physical pain.
Yeah.
What about it?
Like how does it have a special role in the movie?
There's a movement we do in the movements to music called the arms out sideways. This is the Gurdjieff movement, where you hold, for quite about 10 minutes, you hold your arms like that. For us dervishes, it's nothing because we're used to doing it all the time. But if you just hold your arms like that, it really gets really, really painful. And then in the move, during the course of the movement, someone plays a really beautiful bit of music on the piano. And what happens is your attention goes out of this intense pain which is in your arms, and it's sort of somehow it goes down here, your attention, into your heart. And when it's in your heart, you actually don't notice the pain anymore. And I found it a wonderful exercise because I've also known extreme physical pain from illness. And when you're in extreme physical pain, there's a part of you which is aware of the pain, and the part of you which is aware of the pain isn't in pain. So it's physical pain at one level becomes like an amazing yoga that shows you how to access the part of yourself which is always beyond suffering. So if you can avoid physical pain, avoid it. And if you're dying, have the morphine which is offered. But in sort of day-to-day physical pain, and when it's unavoidable, use it as a means of accessing your true sense of being, which is always beyond pain. So at one level, physical pain is like a yoga that helps you access the great stillness.
Can I give an example of how that actually worked? For a while I was getting really severe neuralgia, and I tried dealing with it using healing, and it sort of worked a bit, but it kept on coming back. And eventually what I came to was that I had a sudden understanding, and when I was able to be with the pain and accept it and be totally with it, and almost as though when I dived into it by totally accepting the pain, there was something that was created out of my own being. Then it just dissolved and it disappeared and it never came back. I was just totally present with what was, and that ended it. I wasn't demanding that it ended, but I was just totally present with it. I ceased being utterly in any way separate from it. And that actually dissolved it. And it's never come back.
That's a very nice example.
And it was extreme neuralgia. That's inflammation of a nerve that causes pain.
Any more?
Yeah, was this was the third veil, the mind veil?
Manamaya.
Yeah, the mechanism of discrimination.
That's Vijnanamaya.
Yeah, I kind of Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I understand how it works when you kind of by discriminating things you trace back what is not ultimately what is not you and what is you. But I don't get how it can function as a veil. How can you like get tangled in it?
I get tangled in the mind.
Yeah, in particularly discriminative.
Yeah. I think it has different functions. So you've got more sort of, in inverted commas, more positive and more less positive functions. And in the Advaita tradition, it said that the limitation of the Vijnana Maya is if you don't use it to get behind things, then it's the basis of a false sense of individual doership. So the sort of less positive aspect of it is you think you're a separate self which is doing your doings.
It's like you sticking with certain quality or something.
Yeah. Using it in terms of Vijnana or Prajna, then you look behind things. With any luck, you start to see that you're not the doer of your actions, but it's all part of a much bigger play. But still, they all sort of have their necessary functions. Because at the end of the day, everything is consciousness, and that includes anything which is an impediment as well. You can all go home to bed now.
Not from the last talk.
If ever you want another talk, I'll do one, but you'll have to request it. But apart from that, this is the last talk till the next turning training in October or November. I'll always do one by request if you've got a specific thing you want to talk about. But I don't know any more than you know, so it's just quite nice to meet together and share things. And then you've got Thursday final turning lesson and Friday graduation Makabale. And when we robe normally for Makabale, and on your Friday we go up that little staircase and we robe in this room above us. So on Friday you'll need to take your robes up into this room here for 7 o'clock is robing. And then after your robe we'll do a zikr and we'll teach you one or two other things as well. And then we'll have a Makabale and then we'll have a party.
Music, everything.
Maybe music.
If Lilac brings her.
Yeah, if Lilac brings her oud, there could be music and the lion starts drumming.
That was beautiful that day.
It was lovely music
I
that
really
Lilac
enjoyed it.
played. And Hakeem plays for didgeridoo.
Didgeridoo, yeah. So now I play the violin, no? No.
You should bring your electric guitar along with you.
Well, where I'm gonna plug the guitar?
Where you plug it? I got a little amplifier over
I'm
there.
gonna bring something more crazy than the electric guitar.
Okay.
You're gonna like it. It's
Good.
acoustic, but
Good.
do everything.
Yeah,
If I receive what I order,
yeah,
it's a computer on the
Yeah.
acoustic guitar. Camouflage.
good. Okay, thank you very much, everyone.
Yeah.